Hey, how's it going out there, folks? Welcome back here to a Friday. Finally made it here to the end of the work week. Just about 9 a.m. California time here. Friday, January 10th, 2025 is the date. Latest activity shows a 2.7 here across the Mediterranean region. Also, looks like a 2.6 and some other activity here in California, including a 3.7 earthquake here in the San Francisco Bay Area this morning. This earthquake striking outside the San Francisco Zoo. About 5 miles deep here into the area for a 3.7. That was followed up here a few minutes later by a 2.2. Now that is on the San Andreas Fault, the northern segment, and directly on the area where the 1906 earthquake struck. As you can see here on the historical data, I pulled up the 6.0 and above, since records have been kept out here. Of course, you know, the San Andreas Fault has had a number of large earthquakes over the centuries and thousands of years. But in recent human history here, the 7.9 in 1906 was the last large earthquake here on the northern segment of the San Andreas Fault. Now, if you think about it here, we're in the year 2025. Well over 100 years has passed since this 7.9 struck here in the San Francisco Bay Area. So one has to think, could we be looking at a potential return of some larger activity out here? Very possible. Now the northern segment here, well, in fact, actually the entire San Andreas Fault length averages about 1.3 to 1.5 inches a year across California. So if you do the math on that over the last ever since the 1906 earthquake, if you add the total tally of years there, you'll get a built-up accumulated strain number. And it's possible, hard to say if we're going to see anything here real soon, but obviously we got things stirring up out there today. And as a whole, the West Coast out here, Southern California northward towards the southern end of the Cascadia, has been quite active out here in the last few months. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that. Obviously, a 3.7 is going to be felt across the area. It's a highly populated area. As you can see there on the map, it was felt all over the Bay Area, a little bit there in the Sacramento Valley, but limited there to the San Francisco Bay region. And again, it was only it looks like there was a 2-pointer following that main shake, if that is indeed the main shake. A lot of times out here on these plate boundaries, we'll see what we call foreshocks, and they can happen. So the chances of a bigger quake do go up as we see, you know, a series of quakes, whether it's a swarm or some moderate, even minor activity. We'll continue to keep an eye on that. 1906 is a more recent earthquake here across the San Andreas Fault as a whole. If we look back here at the data, I think I'm a little bit more concerned about the southern end here of the San Andreas Fault. The regular reoccurrence interval of large earthquakes runs about 140 to 160 years across the southern end. And obviously, it's been way over that. So it could be any day when we see something much larger. There's a lot of information on it here. Not going to go into specifically a lot of stuff here, but here's where they mention the southern section has not seen any similar rupture for 300 years. So put that into perspective there of the regular occurrence interval. Right? Well overdue in respect to that. So inland, let's see. I know yesterday a little bit of activity stirring up here off the coast of Santa Barbara. Looks like the majority of this here is from yesterday still. Some further movement here across the Garlock Fault Shear Zone, the Tehachapi Mountains area. That is showing some activity today and yesterday as well. So we are seeing an overall increasing pattern of earthquakes return back to the California area. Bakersfield 3.1 from yesterday. The Los Angeles area, aside from dealing with some big time fires, a couple smaller earthquakes out there this morning, a 2.1 And let's see what we got here for anything above that. Yeah, so mostly microquake activity out here today, but still an increasing obvious sign of some activity stirring up out here. No major swarming going on, just a broader scale event of regional earthquake activity. Sacramento Valley up here on the west side here around the Great Valley Thrust Fault, 2.5 stirring up. You're done again. This area has been quite active here along with the increasing pressure out here across the west coast. Obviously a lower slip rate in terms of the accumulated strain out here. There's, it doesn't show it on the map, but there is a fairly lengthy fault system that runs there along the west side of the Great Valley, Sacramento Valley. I call this the large Death Valley out here because it pretty much acts the same here with mountains, surrounded by mountains here. We get that downslope winds, it gets hot, and they get more rain up in the mountains there, obviously due to the uplift. I call it the Great Death Valley. Of course, that's where I live, so. And aside from that, we got the typical movement here across the Clear Lake volcanic field. 52 earthquakes in the last 24 hours. This has to do with the geothermal operations out here. There's a number of geothermal plants that induce these earthquakes. The area of the Cascadia subduction zone, quiet for now. One earthquake from yesterday. This was the last one recorded here around this area. That's 22 miles deep here into the southern end of the Cascadia subduction zone. Got to remember, even though this shows this on the map, it is not a surface fracture. It's deeper here underneath the area associated with the Cascadia megathrust area that sits offshore. Nevada is still seeing a bunch of activity out here across western Nevada. An overall sign of the strain out here across the plate boundary. It's been like that for a few months here. Yellowstone National Park, nothing showing up, but let's double check that, make sure. Gonna have to excuse my voice here today. Picked up, I could tell, I was picking it up here a couple days ago, but this morning it really hammered me, so I'm gonna try to get through this real quick and not have too many cracks here in my voice. A couple smaller cracks there at Yellowstone, very small earthquakes there. That's really nothing of any major interest. Some very small microquake activity, not even showing up there on the USGS map. Oil fields in Texas, still rocking and rolling out there. The gold fields, well, oil fields that is. New Madrid seismic zone, 2.4 this morning. This is another area of very dangerous potential here. Back in 1811, 1812, a series of large earthquakes struck out here, upper sevens. Something like that today, those folks wouldn't be able to handle it because there's a lot of population out here, a lot of growth has taken place. Would definitely be devastating, but that's been another area of increasing movement as well. As far as worldwide activity goes, largest activity here in the last 24 hours, 5.6 down here in Colombia. About 10 miles deep here, just off the plate boundary of the Colombian Trench. Really not all that deep, just about 10 miles or so. So really nothing major in terms of worldwide earthquake activity. Let's take a look at the Earthquake 3D globe here, see what we have. New Zealand really hasn't filled in here. I was expecting this to fill in a little bit overnight since we had all this activity south here and north of the region. It puts New Zealand right there in the prime spot for some adjustment, but really nothing changing there overnight. Still want to keep an eye on that, though. Across the Philippines area southward, a lot of earthquake activity, but this is pretty much the crunch zone out here. This is where a lot of the plates subduct and collide. Nothing big going on, just the typical daily activity. Some aftershock sequences there following that 7-pointer outside Nepal. That's going to continue for a little while. Got a newer earthquake here across the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench, a 4-pointer. That not showing up here across the USGS map, but it is important there because it's looks like it's fairly deep here, about 70 kilometers here into that subduction zone. This is another area I've been watching for some megaquake activity. It's been it's had a little bit of earthquake activity out here throughout the years, but nothing of full release in terms of megaquake potential. And eventually, megaquakes come to all subduction zones. Alaska, typical activity up there, some twos and whatnot. South America region here should be expecting a little bit further uptick here following this activity off on the Nazca Plate and the Antarctica Plate boundary here to south. 4.8 outside of Easter Island, 6 miles deep. Normally, when the fracture activity occurs out here, that adds further strain against the Peru-Chile Trench. And this is a fairly new earthquake, so we'll watch that throughout the day today for some increasing movement here across the subduction zone. Middle America Trench active as well, but that's like that on any given day. Lots of threes out there, a couple fours, but it's a major subduction zone, always underneath strain, and always seeing earthquake activity on any given day. Ethiopia rift boundary out here, starting to stir back up. Let's take a look at this here, see what we have. Couple from yesterday, couple from today. Today's activity, a 4.7 and a 4.8. This brings up the total tally here to over 100 earthquakes of decent magnitudes here in the Great Rift Zone of Ethiopia. Still a little uncertain on to where this is headed. Most likely some potential volcanic activity if there is enough strain to break through the area. We'll continue to watch that though. Space weather activity starting to drop down as expected here. I mentioned in the last couple updates here how 3947 is fading off like the wind. Well, maybe not like the wind here, but it's degrading quite rapidly here. Not a whole lot of complexity within that sunspot core area anymore. This region back here has been growing the last couple days, kind of popped up out of the blue, but there is a clear defined separation in that core between the red, orange, and the blue and green area, which not necessarily going to produce any strong flaring. That is a new sunspot, but it doesn't look all that active right now. On the UV filter here, we can see it looks like it's starting to grow a little bit, but we'll continue to watch that. I mean, these things can develop quite rapidly. Right now, it's not capable of producing anything significant, but we'll keep our eye on it as it is in position there to potentially grow, and it's facing the Earth. No major flares there in the last couple days. No major roars there in the forecast either. 10% chance for X-flare. M-flare at 45% chance there. A quick glance at the next 5 close approach asteroids here. See what we have on the menu. Well, the menu calls for, obviously, we're always dealing with asteroids out there. There's, thousands upon thousands of asteroids that are zooming by the planet. Some get close, but in this case, there's not a whole lot out here that of any noteworthy value. 750,000 miles there for the closest one, and that's a considerable distance. Storm Prediction Center for severe weather out here. Not a whole lot. Just a little localized thunderstorm activity there across the, well, it looks like they even removed, well, there it is. Kind of popped up down there across the south. Just some thunderstorm activity. Really not expecting anything of significant value or damage. That cold system there is bringing snow across this area. Expected to scoot out towards the east. Bring with it the snow and the moisture. Another cool pull of air venturing down here across the majority of the country, but limited with moisture. So going to have a lot of cold air to deal with. It is wintertime. After that, looks like maybe some further snow coming in behind that. Looks like next weekend. Not this weekend, but next weekend. Got some more snow to deal with. And return of cold air. Not a drop of rain here for California. Not a drop of rain. And this is a little scary because January is our wettest month. That should not look like that. So the patterns out here are stuck, unfortunately, where high pressure is out here across the west coast. That in itself there allows a lot of that colder air to dip down across the areas east of the Rockies, and of course brings with it the cold and snow and whatnot here for the majority of this area of the country. Leaving California, high and dry, unfortunately. I'm here, so I'd rather have it raining than clear and sunny. That's not okay in the wintertime. Palisades fire, up over 20,000 acres here. They're starting to get a little handle of it in terms of the containment. Let me bring this up here a little bit. Why does it want to do that? Looking at 8% containment, 20,438 acres. A little bit of wind there out of the north. Winds are expected to increase here through the weekend and Monday. So hopefully these guys get a handle on it before the fire could potentially re-amplify there. The Kenneth fire that started last night out of the blue, well, as you can see, that's burning down here across the areas of another neighborhood. That satellite image here shows pretty clear conditions. I'm not really seeing any fire on that, but it is at about 1,000 acres there with 35% containment. It looks like forward progress has been stopped. That is good. Doesn't look like we had any homes burned. Got awfully close there as far as the fire parameter goes, but let's check out the hot spots here, see what we have. Yeah, most of the hot spots showing up there from the satellite are back across this area where the fire started, so it's burning some of the areas that have not burned. Although we got a little hot spot way down here showing up on the satellite. Palisades fire. See the hot spot activity out here still burning. A couple areas of amplified fire and hot spots there. Surprised these cameras are still online. You know, hopefully they can get this under control. These little hot spots here, even though they look a little small, you get the wind blowing and you can get a big fire again. I would definitely be focusing on these little hot spots, making sure those are out primarily, because that's not good. The Hearst fire up here north, got about 37% containment on that. That is good. 771 acres there for that fire. Got the Eaton fire. This has the potential to be pretty big, and it is big. 13,000 acres with 3% containment. Notice the satellite imagery here in terms of hotspots shows the majority of the hotspots up north here, building up into the mountains. That's typical in this type of terrain here. You got the topography here, elevation. Even though the wind is somewhat light out here, it's going up. Fires tend to amplify as they head up into the mountains and the hills there. Looks like not a whole lot of hot spots down south here around the residential area, but unfortunately here, a lot of homes have burnt out in this area as well. But for now, this is headed north. All these cameras are offline, obviously, except for well, that one's offline as well. But it's there. Got still some big fires out here to deal with. Nothing. What do we got here? Lydia fire. That's a new one, but it looks like that one may be out. 75% containment there. As far as the wind patterns out here, let's go ahead and check this out. See what we have for the data. There's the evil high pressure system here. It's just parked over off the coast there of Oregon and Northern California, keeping everything dry. While everything else goes up around it and then down. Wind gust out here across Southern California. Minimal. Not seeing anything of any significant wind value right now. Expected to die down through the afternoon a little bit. Saturday, little spotty, but it looks like things may increase there Saturday afternoon and into Sunday as well across the higher peaks. Monday shows a little bit more of a wind event out here across the area north of Los Angeles, so that could be a little concern for the Palisades fire. Yeah, as we got some winds up there around 46, 50 miles an hour on Monday. So hopefully these guys get everything under control before then. Seismograph stations there across the area. One earthquake on China Lake. That's down there in Southern California outside the Ridgecrest area. Aside from that, folks, keep an eye on the West Coast. Got a broader scale event out here taking place again, and it's more active here in the last couple days than we've seen since our 4-pointer events back last year sometime. So things when they're amplified like this, obviously it's a sign of increasing strain out here across the West Coast. And don't believe the false belief there that these little quakes relieve the big one, because that is not true. When we see a broad-scale event out here of elevated seismic activity, that means that things are a higher probability here of having a bigger earthquake. And of course, with all this inland activity recently across Nevada, that's a sign of the pressure out here across the West Coast. Garlock Fault shear zone here being amplified, that's a sign of the strain being produced across that shear zone from the south. The interaction here of the plate boundary between the North American and the Pacific plate, that shear zone right there, shows the strain that's happening out here. It's all being pushed up north here along the San Andreas Fault. It hasn't popped yet, obviously, we know that. But that pressure is building out there, and it's showing out here across the Garlock Fault shear zone. Watch the San Andreas Fault there. We're entering into a time period here, folks, where we could see it on any given segment out here. More than likely the southern segment, even the central. There is some talk here how the Cascadia, the southern end of the Cascadia, normally triggers the northern end of the San Andreas Fault in terms of earthquake activity. Right here, a 2008 paper studying past earthquakes along the Pacific coastal zone. They found a correlation there of seismic events related to the San Andreas Fault and the southern part here of the Cascadia subduction zone. Scientists believe that the quakes there on the Cascadia subduction zone may have triggered most of the major earthquakes on the northern San Andreas within the last 3,000 years. But, except for the 1906 earthquake. There was no big earthquake there along the Cascadia to trigger that one. That one just popped there just due to enough strain. But it just goes to show you here how earthquakes, specifically the big ones, can trigger other fault systems and other plate boundaries here. So you got to be prepared. Living in some interesting times for sure, but one thing's for sure out here is that these earthquakes are going to happen. We live along a major plate boundary. If they didn't happen, then obviously plate tectonics have died off, and that would not be a good thing. We'd be a dying planet out here. But got to deal with these earthquakes. The best way to be prepared, best way to deal with them is to be prepared. We'll catch you guys out here a little bit later on this evening, folks. Have a good day. Enjoy your Friday. I'm going to stock up here on vitamin C and hopefully get my system cleared. Have a good one.